Have you ever found yourself just, stuck? Maybe staring at a huge to-do list or trying to explain a feeling you can't quite name and just wishing you had some kind of manual for your own mind.
Yeah, like a user guide for being human.
Exactly. That feeling of hitting a wall when you're dealing with low mood or trying to find the drive for something you know you should do, but the energy just isn't there.
Or navigating really intense emotional pain or grief. It's universal, isn't it?
Totally. We all wrestle with these things, often feeling pretty alone in it.
Precisely. And what often gets missed is that these struggles, they're usually not about personal failure, not a character flaw, not a broken brain.
Okay.
More often, it really stems from just not having clear, accessible info about how our minds work and, how to handle these internal landscapes effectively. People feel isolated, thinking they're the only ones.
When really, it connects us all.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's deeply human.
That makes so much sense. Which brings us right to today's deep dive. We are taking a really close look at Dr. Julie Smith's fantastic book, Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before?
It's such a practical book.
It really is. We're going to unpack her insights, focusing specifically on, navigating low mood, finding that spark of motivation, dealing with emotional pain, and understanding grief.
Right. Our mission today, really, is to pull out the most powerful, research-backed life skills from Dr. Smith's work. Think of them as tools you can use.
Tools for life.
Exactly. Things you can apply, right away to build resilience and get a better sense of control over your emotional world. It's like a personalized guide to a mental health toolkit.
And not just for crises, right? More like daily mental fitness.
Precisely. It's like investing in your future well-being, building that inner strength day by day so you're better equipped for whatever life throws at you.
All right, let's get into it. Dr. Smith starts with this fundamental point. Low mood isn't a sign you failed or that your brain is faulty. It happens to everyone.
Everyone. It's just part of the human experience. The difference, she points out, is really about frequency, how intense it gets and how long it sticks around.
Which is kind of liberating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we often feel pressure to be fine all the time.
Oh, absolutely. And she talks about how many people hide their low mood, comparing themselves to others who seem, perpetually cheerful, which leads to feeling so isolated.
Like you're the only one struggling.
Right. You buy into this idea that happiness is just something you either have or you don't. But she uses this brilliant analogy, body temperature.
Oh, yeah. I like that.
It changes constantly, right? Based on internal things, external things, if it's cold, if you're running. Your mood, she says, is the same. It's influenced by so many factors, and crucially, you can influence it.
That's such a game changer. Moving from something's wrong with me to, okay, I have some control here. I can actually do something.
Exactly. Mood isn't fixed. It's dynamic. It's a sensation we experience, and we have more power than we think.
So the goal isn't to, never feel low again.
No, not at all. Life throws curveballs, pain, loss, hardship. Our mental and physical health will reflect that. The goal is more about building a toolbox of skills.
Life skills.
Essential life skills, not just for serious illness, but for managing the everyday ups and downs, the little dips too. Of course, she's very clear if you're dealing with severe, enduring mental illness, professional support is key. That provides the foundation for using these skills.
What I found so helpful was how she connects these abstract feelings to, concrete physical stuff. Like her example of waking up feeling that dread, irritation, exhaustion.
Yeah, that familiar heavy feeling.
But then she traces it back. It wasn't random. It was staying up too late, dehydration, a blaring alarm, stress hormones flooding her system.
Exactly. It shows that feelings don't just appear out of thin air. They're a result of lots of inputs.
So the brain is constantly interpreting.
Constantly. It's pulling info from your body, heart rate, breathing, hormones. Then it adds input from your senses, what you see, hear, touch.
Yeah.
And it layers on memories of similar feelings. From all that data, it makes a best guess, a suggestion. That's what we feel as an emotion or mood. And here's the kicker. How you interpret that feeling and how you respond feeds back to the brain and body.
Telling it what to do next.
Precisely. Which underlines her point. Mood isn't only in your head. It's this complex dance between your body, your relationships, your lifestyle, diet, actions, memories. Everything.
And this leads to what she calls the two-way road, which I found really interesting. We always hear, change your thoughts, change your feelings.
Right, the cognitive part, which is true.
But she flips it too.
Yeah.
How you feel actually influences the thoughts that pop into your head.
Exactly. It makes you more vulnerable to those negative, self-critical thought loops. which is why just trying to think positive when you feel awful often doesn't work. It feels forced, sometimes impossible.
And she talks about that downward spiral, right?
Yeah.
Feeling low makes you not want to do things you enjoy.
Which then makes you feel lower. Gilbert's concept adapted really well there. Your own actions, driven by the low mood, end up feeding it.
It's insidious.
It really is. The urge you get when you feel low to withdraw, to stop exercising, to isolate, is often the very thing that keeps the mood going or makes it worse.
Like wicker strands woven together.
That's her beautiful analogy. Thoughts, body sensations, emotions, actions, they're all interconnected. They don't exist in isolation. Understanding that is the first step to finding a way out.
So where do you start if everything's interwoven?
Awareness. Building awareness of these different connected parts, just noticing them. It usually starts with looking back, hindsight.
Reflecting on a moment.
Yeah, thinking about a challenging moment from your day and examining it. What was I thinking, feeling? What did my body feel like? What did I do? With practice, you start noticing this stuff in real time.
In the moment.
And that's where the power is. That's when you can choose to do something different.
She gives good examples, like noticing you feel tired, sluggish, maybe lost your appetite.
Physical sensations.
Then noticing the thoughts, I'm so lazy, what's wrong with me?
The self-criticism kicks in.
And then the urges hide away, scroll endlessly on your phone.
Right, seeing that whole chain reaction.
And she offers a tool for this, the cross-sectional formulation.
Yes, figure 2 in the book. It's a fantastic, practical way to map out a specific moment of distress. Thoughts, emotions, body sensations, actions, how they all interacted.
So you can see what keeps you stuck.
Exactly. And also what might help you get unstuck. She gives prompts for journaling, what led up to it, what thoughts, what emotions, where in your body, what urges did you act on them, and critically, how did that action then affect everything else?
It sounds like a bit of work, but I can see how doing that consistently would build serious self-awareness.
It really does. You become a sort of detective of your own inner experience, understanding what helps and what hinders you.
Okay, so once you have some awareness, what are the traps to avoid? She talks about instant relief.
Ah, yes. The lure of the quick fix. When you feel bad, you just want it to stop. So you reach for something, alcohol, food, endless scrolling.
The numbing agents.
Right. It works, but only for a moment. That's the vicious cycle of instant relief she describes, drawing on Isabel Clarke's work.
It feels good short term.
But the feelings come back, often stronger, and the things that really help long term. They're usually not fast acting, so that cycle makes it really hard to stick with the helpful strategies.
And then she dives into these thought patterns that make you feel worse. The biases. This part was fascinating.
It really is key. These cognitive biases are normal human shortcuts, but they get louder and more rigid when our mood is low. Understanding them is huge.
So let's break them down. Mind reading.
Assuming you know what others are thinking, usually negative stuff. She didn't call back. She must be mad at me. You treat your guests like a fact, especially when you're feeling vulnerable.
Leading to needing reassurance constantly.
Which often doesn't land. Then there's overgeneralization.
Taking one bad thing and making it
Everything.
Exactly. Spill your coffee. Well, that's my day ruined. It's going to be one of those days.
Yeah.
Or a breakup means I'll never find love. It's a quick slide into hopelessness. Egocentric thinking. That sounds a bit harsh.
It's more about your focus narrowing when you're struggling. You see things mainly from your own perspective, apply your own rules to everyone else. Like, I would never be late, so if he's late, he must not care. Hard to see their side.
Makes sense. Emotional reasoning.
This one's powerful. Believing your feelings are facts. I feel like I failed the exam, therefore I must have failed. The feeling dictates your reality, regardless of the actual evidence.
Dangerous. The mental filter.
Like a sieve, your brain filters out anything that contradicts your negative belief and holds on to anything that confirms it. You ignore 10 positive comments to fixate on the one negative one.
Oh, I recognize that one.
We all do. Then musts and shoulds.
The perfectionism trap.
Big time. I must always succeed. I should never make mistakes. Sets you up for misery because, well, you're human.
And finally, all or nothing thinking.
Black and white. No gray areas. If it's not perfect, it's a total failure. Makes emotional reactions much more intense, much harder to bounce back from.
It's crucial, though, that she says these aren't malfunctions, right? They're mental shortcuts. Our brain's trying to be efficient, especially under stress.
Exactly. They give a false sense of certainty, but they can lead us way off track when mood is low.
So, what do we do about these biases if we can't just stop them?
It's not about stopping the thoughts from arriving. That's often impossible. The power lies in how you respond to them.
Okay.
Seeing them as biased suggestions from your brain, not absolute facts. That act of labeling them instantly reduces their power over you. You get to choose your response then.
And this is where metacognition comes in. Thinking about your thinking.
Precisely. She uses that great analogy from The Mask.
Jim Carrey.
Yeah. If he wears the mask, he sees the world through its crazy lens. But if he takes it off, holds it at arm's length, it loses its power to distort his reality. That's stepping back from your thoughts.
I love that. So metacognition lets you see thoughts as just ideas.
Ideas offered up by your brain. Opinions, judgments, stories, memories, predictions. Not ultimate truths. Your brain's just trying to make sense of things, save energy. Observing that process gives you distance, critical distance.
So practically, how do we get that distance?
Dr. Smith suggests a few things. Reflecting on biases after the emotion has cooled down, start with hindsight.
Build that muscle.
Exactly. Journaling is huge, separating thoughts, feelings, sensations, then labeling the biases you spot.
Okay.
Using distancing language. Instead of, I am a failure, try, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure. It's subtle but powerful.
Changes your relationship to the thought.
It does. Talking to a trusted friend can help too. They might see biases you miss. And starting a formal mindfulness practice trains you to observe thoughts without getting tangled up in them.
It sounds like an ongoing practice.
Definitely. Not a quick fix. The goal is a more balanced, fair, compassionate perspective, tolerating uncertainty, making conscious choices, not just reacting. It stops small biased thoughts snowballing.
Okay, so if we can't fully control the thoughts that pop up, what can we control? You mentioned our spotlight of attention.
Yes, this is where agency really comes in. Mindfulness, she explains, is like grabbing control of that spotlight.
Choosing where to shine it.
Intentionally directing your attention where you want it to go, rather than letting your mind just latch on to whatever floats by, especially the negative stuff. It's not about blocking thoughts, but choosing what to turn up the volume on.
Which connects back to knowing what you actually want, not just what you're trying to avoid. She calls mindfulness a driving lesson for the mind.
It really is. It's practice. Laying down new neural pathways. So when you need those skills later, under pressure, they're more available, more automatic.
And this is vital for dealing with rumination, that thoughts washing machine.
Oh, absolutely. Rumination, churning painful thoughts over and over, is a key factor in keeping depression going. Watkins and Roberts' research highlights this. The more you ruminate, the deeper you get stuck.
So how do you stop the spin cycle?
Dr. Smith offers practical steps. An active stop. Maybe even saying it out loud, paired with immediate physical movement. Stand up. Walk outside. Moving your body can really shift your mental state.
Get unstuck physically to get unstuck mentally.
Sometimes, yeah. Another technique. Asking yourself, what would I do if I was at my best? Even when you feel awful, this creates a picture of the direction you want to go, guides your action.
Gives you a compass.
Exactly. And human connection, talking to someone you trust. They can act like a mirror, help you see the rumination, and gently shift your focus.
So mindfulness isn't just meditation, it's a way of being present and choosing your focus.
It's a state of mind, yeah, which leads nicely into gratitude practice.
Simple, but powerful.
Incredibly. Daily listing 3 things you're grateful for actively trains your brain to look for the good. It makes it easier to access positive feelings because you're strengthening those neural pathways. Brain training in action.
Okay, shifting gears slightly. Decision making. It feels impossible when your mood is low.
Utterly paralyzing. Dr. Smith's advice is key. Aim for good decisions, not perfect ones. Perfectionism is often the enemy here. Good enough is what actually moves you forward.
She uses that deep water analogy.
Right. If you're treading water in the dark, doing nothing means you'll eventually sink. You have to choose a direction and move, even a tiny bit. Any positive action is a step forward, breaking that paralysis of low mood.
And shifting from emotion-based decisions
to values-based ones. What really matters to you? What are your core values for health, relationships, life? Aligning your choices with those values gives you a powerful anchor, even when emotions are stormy.
Consistency over intensity. That came up again.
Crucial. Small, daily, manageable changes, not giant leaps that lead to burnout. Slow change is sustainable change. These small steps build new habits.
Which brings us to self-criticism. It gets louder with low mood, right?
Almost automatically. And just telling yourself, stop being so hard on yourself, rarely works if it's a deep habit. You can't always stop the thought, but you can distance from it.
See it as an emotion-loaded judgment.
Not an objective fact. Recognize it for what it is.
And she has that exercise Thinking about someone you love unconditionally.
Yes. How would you talk to them if they were beating themselves up like that? What compassion, what encouragement would you offer? That unlocks the self-compassion we often deny ourselves.
Because self-compassion isn't about letting yourself off the hook.
Not at all. Dr. Smith calls it the voice you most need to hear. Honest, encouraging, supportive, it helps you get back up. Research actually shows self-criticism increases depression, while self-compassion increases motivation and leads to better outcomes. It's counterintuitive for many.
So pulling this together for low mood, tools like the Better Days formulation or the miracle question.
Yeah, if the problems vanished overnight, what's the first thing you'd notice? It helps create a vision, focus on the solution, shift your gaze forward.
And finally, the defense players, the basics.
The absolute foundation. Her analogy of the football team with no defenders is perfect. Sleep, exercise, nutrition, routine, connection. These are crucial. But they're often the first things to go when we struggle.
And she argues we massively underestimate their power. They're not just nice-to-haves.
No, they are potent, scientifically backed interventions. We neglect them right when we need them most.
Let's quickly touch on each. Exercise.
Potent antidepressant effects, even comparable to medication in some studies. Boosts dopamine, enhances pleasure capacity. It's about how it makes you feel, not just appearance. Even small amounts, nature walks, yoga, it all helps.
Lovely.
Profound impact. It's a two-way street with mental health. Poor sleep tanks mood, low mood disrupts sleep. Her tips are practical. Daylight exposure, dim screens, worry lists before bed, focus on relaxing, not forcing sleep, avoid caffeine, sugar late.
Nutrition.
Mental health and physical health are weaves in the same basket. What you eat directly impacts your brain. Better diet, reduce depression symptoms. Focus on whole, unprocessed foods. Mediterranean, Japanese, Norwegian diets are good models.
Routine.
Provides predictability, safety. The pandemic really showed us its importance. When it breaks down late nights, no morning structure, it has a cascading negative effect. Small drops of cordial add up. And human connection.
Possibly the most powerful tool. Poor relationships hurt mood. Low mood hurts relationships, a vicious cycle. Depression pushes you to isolate. Acting against that urge is key. Action first, feeling follows. Simple connection counts, just being around people, brief chats, benefits both giver and receiver.
It's really about consistent small improvements across the board, isn't it? Building that solid foundation. Okay, so we've got the foundations, the defense players. But what about when you know what to do, get better sleep, exercise, reach out, but you just don't feel like it, that lack of motivation?
The I just can't be bothered feeling. Dr. Smith has some really helpful insights here. First off, motivation isn't a skill you learn or a fixed personality trait.
It's not like you're either a motivated person or you're not.
Exactly. It's more like a sensation. It comes and goes, like an emotion. So you can't rely on it always being there. Your brain's constantly checking your body state. How much energy do we have for this task? But the good news is we can influence that feeling by what we do with our bodies. So for that can't be bothered feeling, she talks about 2 lines of attack.
2 prongs, yeah. First, actively learn how to cultivate the feeling of motivation, make it more likely to show up. And second, learn the crucial skill of acting in your best interest even when motivation is totally absent. Doing it anyway.
Right. Doing what you need to do regardless of feeling.
Which requires distinguishing between 2 types of not feeling like it. Procrastination.
Avoiding something because it feels stressful or unpleasant. Like her example of not watching difficult videos.
Exactly. And then there's anhedonia.
Which is deeper. Losing pleasure in things you used to enjoy, often linked to depression. Everything feels flat, meaningless.
Right. Not just avoidance, but a lack of capacity for joy. And the key insight, which feels backwards sometimes, is that the feeling of motivation rarely just appears out of the blue.
You have to create it through action.
Precisely. Doing nothing feeds the lethargy. Motivation is often a byproduct of action. Think about exercise you feel good after, not always before. For anhedonia, she acknowledges it's a real grind. Doing things that matter even without pleasure, to slowly re-engage those reward pathways.
So how do we invite motivation? How do we cultivate it?
First, move your body. Even small amounts boost willpower. Find joy in movement if you can. You might have to act opposite to the urge initially, push through resistance, but the impact is huge. Changes your brain chemistry.
And staying connected to the goal.
Absolutely vital. Keep it fresh, vivid, meaningful. Daily journaling helps even just one small step you'll take today. And a quick reflection at night keeps you focused and accountable.
Keep it small. That came up again.
Always. Avoid the massive overhauls. Real change happens one small, manageable task at a time. Build momentum.
And internal rewards, the pat on the back.
So important. Acknowledge the small wins. It reinforces that your efforts matter, builds agency, fuels you to keep going.
This links to resisting temptation too, right?
Yeah.
Willpower.
Yes. Willpower is higher when stress is low. Chronic stress, lack of sleep, they reduce your heart rate variability, your nervous system's flexibility. Makes you more impulsive, more likely to choose short-term relief over long-term goals. Exercise and sleep directly boost that willpower.
What about failure? It can completely derail motivation.
Totally. If failure triggers that harsh self-criticism, that shame, you just want to hide. It sabotages future efforts. Shame is not motivating. It makes you want to escape.
But people resist self-compassion thinking it's lazy.
Right. But the research is clear. Self-criticism fuels depression, while self-compassion actually increases motivation and resilience. It helps you learn and try again. It's firm but kind accountability.
So reflect on the self-criticism, notice the feelings, and then ask how you'd treat a loved one.
That shift in perspective fosters compassion and accountability.
Okay, but what about things that will just never feel good? Taxes, cleaning the bathroom. How do you do them when motivation is zero?
That's where opposite action comes in from DBT, Linehan's work. The polo mint analogy is great.
The urge to crunch it.
It's strong, but awareness creates that gap between urge and action. You can choose not to crunch, even with a strong urge. You can choose to act against the urge to procrastinate or avoid.
And the pan barrier concept for habits.
Yeah. Old habits, like brushing teeth, are easy neural pathways. New behaviors need effort to carve new paths. Repetition is key. Repeat it enough, consistently enough, and it becomes automatic, gets past that initial effort barrier.
Tips for forming habits.
Make it easy. Set up your environment for success. Make clear plans. Use internal rewards. Clarify why it matters, connect to values, and make it part of your identity. This is just who I am now.
Sustaining things long-term, though. Grit. Perseverance. How?
It's not about nonstop grinding. It's about counterbalancing effort with replenishment. Real rest, not just scrolling, stepping outside, closing your eyes. Intentional rest is crucial.
Small rewards along the way.
Definitely. Break down big goals, reward milestones. Those dopamine hits refuel desire, suppress the urge to quit. Focus on the next ridge, not the distant summit.
Gratitude practice helps here too.
Hugely. Self-generates internal rewards, strengthens helpful pathways, and shifting language, I have to, becomes I get to, changes the frame.
And pre-planning. Anticipating obstacles.
Yes. Create crisis plans for when motivation dips. Engineer your environment, make the good choice easy, the bad choice hard. Alarm clock across the room. Ultimately, it comes back to identity. If the goal aligns with who you want to be, you can act in line with that, even when motivation flags. Her future self-memory journal exercise helps visualize that, and the DVT pros and cons table helps weigh the real costs and benefits of change.
What if you know you need a big change, but feel totally lost about where to start?
That feeling of being stuck but unsure why, Dr. Smith says you cannot change what you cannot make sense of. Back to metacognition, understanding the problem deeply first.
Einstein's 55 minutes on the problem, 5 on the solution.
Exactly. Deep understanding first. Journaling helps build that awareness, identify the patterns, see how small things add up, build accountability to yourself.
Using those journal prompts, what happened? Thoughts, feelings, urges, consequences.
Yes. That structured reflection brings the clarity needed for real change.
Let's talk about emotional pain now. A lot of people go into therapy basically saying, make this feeling stop.
It's a common starting point. But Dr. Smith's approach, which is central to a lot of therapy, isn't about erasing emotions. It's about changing your relationship with them.
Okay, how does that work?
Well, emotions aren't enemies. They're not random. They're your brain trying to make sense of your world and your body. Remember the coffee palpitations example?
Yeah, leading to panic.
The brain interprets the physical signs, pounding heart, faster breathing, maybe combined with past memories, as danger. It sends the not safe signal, ramping up the threat response. It's an interpretation.
So we have more influence than we think.
More than we often realize. It's about taking responsibility for building new ways of experiencing and responding, not just being passively swept away.
So what should we not do with painful emotions?
Number 1, don't just try to push them away. She uses that brilliant ocean waves analogy.
Standing in the surf.
Yeah. Try to hold back the waves. You get overwhelmed, knocked over. Allow them to wash over you. Brace yourself. Move with them. They rise, peak, and recede naturally. Fighting feelings just makes it harder.
And like thoughts, don't believe emotions are facts.
Exactly. They're real, your experience is valid, but they are a guess, a perspective, not the absolute truth. CBT helps us step back, see them as just one possible interpretation.
So question them if they're leading you somewhere unhelpful.
Yes. Otherwise, life becomes just reacting to feelings instead of making informed choices based on values. Cultivate curiosity about your inner world. Even mistakes, view them with detachment. Ask, what can I learn? Not just, why am I so stupid?
She has a toolkit for examining coping strategies, too.
Right. Noticing early signs where you feel it physically, the thoughts, the underlying fears, the short versus long-term consequences of how you cope. Talking to a friend helps get perspective, too.
So what should we do? She shared her own experience with mindfulness during stress.
Running and just allowing the anxiety to be there. Noticing it passed more quickly when she didn't fight it. Sometimes just allowing is the most effective thing. No need to problem solve right in the middle of the storm.
The idea of welcoming emotions feels scary, especially the painful ones.
It does initially, but welcoming means letting them move through you. Rise, peak, descend, like the waves, not getting stuck.
Mindfulness creates that amber light, that pause.
Exactly. That space between the urge and the action. That's where choice lives. Choosing based on values, the bigger picture, not just immediate reaction, like the artist stepping back from the canvas.
And remembering you are not your feelings.
Crucial. They're an experience passing through, giving you information about what you need. Start with the basics: sleep, food, movement. No amount of psychological skill overrides neglecting biology.
Then pick a name. Get specific about the emotion.
Beyond just happy or sad, use nuanced words: vulnerable, ashamed, bitter, grateful, bewildered. Naming helps regulate the emotion, reduces stress. It gives you a handle on it.
How do you build that vocabulary?
Get specific. Use combinations. Invent words. Explore new experiences. Food, books, art, people. Use tools like the feeling wheel. And don't just focus on the negative ones. Journal about positive experiences too, even small ones. Strengthens those positive pathways. Makes it easier to access joy.
Okay, but what about when emotions feel totally overwhelming? Intolerable, self-soothing?
Oh, yes. Riding the wave when it feels huge. This draws on distress tolerance skills from DBT. Your threat system is screaming, not safe.
So you need to give it information that says you are safe.
Exactly. Through your senses, your body. Warm bath, warm drink, chat with a friend, gentle movement, calming music or images, slow breathing, comforting scents. Smell is very direct lavender, maybe?
And the self-soothing box idea.
Brilliant. Prepare it before you're distressed, when you can think clearly. Fill it with things that help you cope. A note to call someone, pen, paper, lavender oil, photos, playlist, tea bag, whatever works.
And keep it easy to find when you're vulnerable. Makes the helpful choice easier.
Absolutely. Pre-planning for distress.
The language we use shapes our experience too. Vague words hide complexity.
Right. More specific emotional words give your brain more flexibility, less stress, more options for making sense and responding.
What about supporting someone else who's struggling? It feels so inadequate sometimes. You want to fix it, but you can't.
It's hard. Witnessing pain is stressful, can make you want to pull away. Dr. Smith gives such vital, compassionate advice here.
Let's run through it. Simply being there.
Immensely powerful. Don't underestimate presence. Learn about their diagnosis if they have one. Ask them how they want support. Don't assume.
Prioritize your own health. Boundaries.
Essential. Avoid burnout. Get your own support. Set boundaries. Your life matters too. Work on a crisis plan together for safety.
Listening. Compassion, kindness, curiosity. Not advice unless asked.
Key. Connection in small moments, walking together. Silence is okay. Use open questions. What are you thinking? Not just, are you okay?
Practical help. Sensitivity.
Offer practical things, meals, chores. Be sensitive around difficult dates or firsts. And it's okay to change the subject. Sometimes distraction can be welcome.
No expectations on healing time. And honesty.
Crucial. Healing isn't linear, and if you don't know how to help, just say so. That honesty builds real trust. Social support doesn't need all the answers, just compassion.
A big dose of compassion.
Yeah.
Okay, let's unpack grief. We usually think of it just in terms of death.
Right. But Dr. Smith broadens that significantly. Grief can be triggered by any significant ending that held meaning for you.
Like the pandemic losses, jobs, certainty, connection.
Exactly. Those are real losses, triggering real grief. It's a normal human experience, not a failure or disorder. It's that deep yearning for connection that doesn't just switch off when the relationship or situation ends.
And the body grieves too. It's physical.
Profoundly physical. The shock triggers a huge stress response. It can feel like physical pain, exhaustion, and aches.
So help in grief isn't about making the pain disappear or forgetting.
No. It's about understanding the emotional roller coaster is normal and finding safe ways to process it. Trying to block grief, though tempting because the pain is immense, can lead to feeling numb, hollow, struggling for meaning, potentially depression or substance issues down the line.
She uses the ocean of grief analogy here, too.
Yes. Stepped in, feel it, breathe, step back to rest on the shore. Over time, you build strength to immerse yourself more, knowing you can return to safety. Feeling it doesn't erase it, but you build capacity to live alongside it.
What about the stages of grief? Kubler-Ross.
They're descriptions of common experiences, not a rigid roadmap, not linear, no set order or time frame, just things you might notice.
Denial.
Helps survive the initial shock, allows gradual processing of the unbearable reality.
I'm here.
Often comes from deep pain or fear. Expressing it, maybe physically, can be cathartic, but just ruminating on it makes it worse.
Bargaining.
The what-ifs, if-onlys, leads to self-blame, trying to mentally undo what happened.
Suppression.
Intense sadness, emptiness, a normal reaction to loss, not necessarily clinical depression in this context. Accepting it as part of grief allows for soothing and eventual re-engagement.
Acceptance.
Often misunderstood. Not liking it, it's taking on the new reality. Listening to your needs, opening to new experiences. And it's not an endpoint you cycle back and forth. Feeling joy doesn't mean you're doing grief wrong. Grief comes in waves. Then there are Worden's 4 tasks of mourning, a more active approach.
Accept the reality. Work through the pain. Adjust to the new environment. Find a new way to connect while re-engaging with life.
And the key is moving between feeling the pain and replenishing. Can't do it all at once. Need rest.
So it's okay to feel everything.
Yeah.
Despair, rage, confusion, but also joy.
Laughter.
Absolutely. Feeling guilty for living again is normal, but allowing joy is crucial for healing, for honoring what was lost.
Small steps matter. Don't underestimate just washing your face.
Exactly. No shoulds about feelings or timelines. It's personal.
Expression is vital. Talking, writing, art. Find a safe outlet. And set boundaries for stepping into and out of the intensity. Allow rest. And the idea of remember and keep living. Reconciling the pain of remembering with the need to live now. Learning how they can coexist. Celebrating their life, maintaining connection, while choosing to live meaningfully.
Which leads to grow around the wound.
Rando's concept. The wound doesn't vanish. You build a life around it. You learn your capacity for survival, for growth, and seeking professional help.
It doesn't mean you're failing at grief.
Not at all. It's a sanctuary, a trained presence to help make sense, manage safely, listen without judgment, walk with you through it.
Finally, Julia Samuel's Pillars of Strength for Rebuilding.
A great framework. Requires work and persistence.
Let's list them. Relationship with the person who died.
Finding new ways to feel close places, memorials, talking to them.
Relationship with the self.
Self-awareness, self-care, listening to your needs, compassion.
Expressing grief.
Allowing it naturally in your own way.
Time.
Dropping expectations about timelines, one day at a time.
Mind and body.
Nurturing the basics, exercise, nutrition, connection. Strengthens your foundation.
Limits.
Setting boundaries. Listening to yourself, even if others offer unhelpful advice.
Structure.
Balancing predictability and flexibility in routines prevents deterioration.
Focusing.
When words fail, observing internal sensations, visualizing them, builds awareness.
Nurturing these pillars gives you a stable structure to navigate grief and rebuild. #outro.
Oh.
Wow. What an incredibly rich exploration today, diving into Dr. Julie Smith's book, Why Has Nobody Told Me This Before? We've covered so much ground, from understanding low mood and finding motivation to processing emotional pain and navigating grief.
It really covers such essential life territory.
And that thread running through it all, the idea of agency. That you, listening right now, have more influence than you might think. That you can build this personal toolkit for resilience.
Absolutely. It's about empowering yourself with understanding and practical skills.
So as we wrap up, here's a final thought for you to mull over, drawing from Dr. Smith's work.
If you were to pick just one life skill from everything we've discussed today, just one tool to really commit to practicing consistently, starting now, which one would it be? And how could you start integrating that, even in a very small way, into your daily life?
A really powerful question to end on. Something concrete to take away and act on. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive today. We hope you feel encouraged to reflect on these insights and start applying them, one small, compassionate step at a time. Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take a stack of incredible insights and distill them into actionable knowledge just for you. Today, we're plunging into some really core human experiences. Self-doubt, fear, stress, and that big one, the quest for a meaningful life. These aren't just, abstract ideas. They're the stuff we navigate every single day. Our mission here is really to cut through all the noise and give you a shortcut to understanding these things better.
Precisely. We're going to explore why these feelings pop up, how they sometimes trip us up, definitely, and crucially, how we can maybe transform them, turn them from roadblocks into, pathways for growth and resilience. We've pulled out the most important nuggets from the sources you shared, aiming for some surprising facts, practical strategies, maybe a few aha moments along the way.
Okay, let's kick things off with something we all face. Criticism and disapproval. It gets such a bad rap, right? Always painted as this purely negative thing. But the sources suggest it's much more nuanced. It's not just getting a direct negative comment. It's even the anticipation of criticism. That alone can be paralyzing. It can stop you cold from going after what you actually care about. Imagine that.
That really brings up a key question. Why is it so powerful? Our brains are basically wired, hardwired even, to care about how others see us. If you think back historically, being rejected by your group, your community, that was a serious threat, like life or death, serious. So criticism naturally flips that stress switch, gets us ready for action. It's deep, evolutionary. And even though maybe the stakes aren't literal survival now, that feeling of rejection, loneliness, it's still a huge threat to our well-being.
So if it's wired in for survival, what are some of the less obvious ways this affects us day to day? The sources mention this idea of the looking glass self, the idea that our identity isn't just us. It's shaped by what we think others think about us, which means just telling yourself, stop caring what they think. Well, it might work for a minute, but it's fighting some pretty fundamental wiring. It doesn't usually last.
And that wiring, that caring about perception, it can easily slide into a pattern, people-pleasing. Which is, like you said, more than just being nice. Being nice is great. But this is different. It's when you consistently put other people's needs way ahead of your own, even when it hurts you. The tricky part isn't just that you don't get your needs met or hold boundaries. It's that over time, it kind of messes with your internal compass. You might not even know what you need or want anymore. You get stuck looking outside for validation.
That resentment piece you mentioned, I bet a lot of people listening recognize that. Saying yes when every part of you screams no, then feeling sort of bitter about it. What's the hidden cost there? And the fear of messing up, of disapproval. It never really goes away in that pattern, does it? Because there's always someone you might displease, even someone you don't particularly like.
Exactly. And crucially, people-pleasing often starts young. Maybe growing up in a place where disagreeing or just being different wasn't safe. If saying no or having your own opinion led to anger or maybe contempt, well, as a kid, you learn fast. Keeping people happy becomes a survival skill, a really well-honed one. It's only later as adults that we realize those patterns are actually harming our relationships, our sense of self. We end up second-guessing everything.
Right. And here's where it gets really interesting. We don't always get direct criticism, do we? Our minds are brilliant at filling in the gaps. That's the spotlight effect, isn't it? We think everyone's paying way more attention to us than they actually are. We're the center of our own world, so we assume we're the center of theirs too. But mostly, people are focused on themselves. So we might assume they're judging us negatively when, honestly, they might barely have noticed. The sources point out that socially anxious people tend to focus inward on how they're coming across, whereas more confident people tend to have this outward curiosity about others.
So if we're wired to care and maybe we fall into people-pleasing, the goal isn't to just switch off caring completely. That's probably impossible. It's more about building the muscle to tolerate helpful criticism, use it, but also develop a strong enough sense of self-worth to let go of the stuff that's just noise or someone else's agenda. It involves being open to learning, but also getting really clear on whose opinions actually count for you and why. That makes it easier to sort the useful feedback from all the rest.
That also means trying to understand the critic, right? The sources say that often very critical people are also super critical of themselves. So what comes out of their mouth might just be mirroring their own inner dialogue. It's just how they talk to everyone. Plus, we have this bias, this egocentric thing where we think our way is the right way. So criticism can just be someone else's worldview bumping up against yours, not some objective truth about your worth. It's their idea based on their life.
Which leads us straight into self-worth and shame resilience. because not all criticism hits the same way. If someone gives feedback on a specific behavior you relate, that might trigger guilt. Guilt says, I did something bad, and motivates us to fix it. But when the attack is on our personality, our worth, you're so lazy, you're not good enough, that triggers shame. Shame says, I am bad. And it's intensely painful. It's often mixed with anger, disgust. You just want to vanish, hide. It's overwhelming.
Yeah, it hits that threat system hard. Feels like bang. Every negative emotion gets amplified. Your body goes into fight, flight, freeze, flooding you with adrenaline, cortisol. And that physiological state just makes the shame feel enormous. Anger, fear, disgust, all bubbling up. Then the self-attack starts. The inner critic goes wild. You idiot, why did you do that? Blame, blame, blame. And the instinct is just block it, numb it. But shame's sticky, isn't it? So we reach for distractions, addictions, anything for temporary relief.
Looking at the bigger picture, shame resilience isn't about never feeling shame again. It's something you practice for life. It means knowing how to pick yourself up after shame knocks you down. And that involves a few things. First, know your triggers. What makes you feel shame? Often it's things tied to your self-worth, parenting, appearance, work. Resilience means understanding your worth isn't on the line with every mistake. Second, reality check the criticism. Whether it's external or internal, those judgments, they're stories, not facts. Strip away the name-calling. Focus on specific behaviors. Remind yourself, being imperfect, messing up, that's human. Making friends with your fallibility, as they say, means failure doesn't have to mean worthless. It can mean learning.
And that means watching what you say to yourself afterwards. Criticism will sting a bit. That's just the brain trying to protect us. No magic fix for that. But like the sources say, just replaying nasty comments in your head, that's like kicking yourself again and again. The stress response fires up each time. Learning to talk to yourself with respect, with compassion, that's crucial for bouncing back. It's about having your own back, really, so you can figure out what feedback is useful and what's just damaging.
And a really vital piece, don't keep shame locked away.
Yeah.
Secret, silence, judgment, they just feed it. Sharing your experience with someone you trust, someone who meets you with empathy, that helps dissolve shame. It makes it less isolating, less powerful.
So living the life you want, even with criticism around, it means getting clear on some things. First, whose opinions really matter and why. Saying, I don't care what anyone thinks, often isn't true, and it kind of shuts down connection. The forces say this list should be small. People whose feedback you value because it's probably honest, coming from a good place. Not necessarily praise, but helpful. Acknowledging them doesn't mean you have to please them, just that you're willing to listen.
Second, really understanding why you do what you do. At the end of the day, the approval you need most is your own. When how we're living doesn't line up with our core values, life feels off. Meaningless even. Knowing who you want to be, how you want to live, what you want to stand for, that's your compass. And when you have that clarity, it's much easier to decide which criticisms align with your path and which ones are just detours suggested by others.
And third, recognizing where those critical voices in your head actually came from. If you grew up with someone who was always critical, you'd almost learn to anticipate it. You hear their voice in your head. We internalize that. We become our own harshest critic because, well, we learned how. Recognizing that means we can also unlearn it. We can consciously choose a different, more helpful inner dialogue. Okay, building on that idea of inner strength, having your own back. Let's talk about confidence. We tend to think of it as this fixed thing, right? You either have it or you don't, like a personality trait. But the sources really challenge that view. They paint it as something built brick by brick. With every new experience, the author's own story, leaving home, new jobs, becoming a parent, putting work out there, shows how confidence is so specific to the situation. What felt like enough confidence in one area suddenly wasn't enough for the next challenge. Vulnerability popped right back up.
That's such a key insight. Confidence isn't about feeling comfortable or never feeling fear. It's almost the opposite. It's about being willing to feel the fear, to let it be there while you do things that matter to you anyway. If we only ever do things where we already feel confident, that zone never grows. Our fear of the new actually gets bigger. So building confidence means, inevitably, getting comfortable with being vulnerable. Because you have to operate without confidence for a bit.
Which perfectly tees up the learning model. Comfort zone, stretch zone, panic zone. The sweet spot, the sources say, is deliberately stepping into that stretch zone, where it feels challenging, but not totally overwhelming. Every time you do that, you're building courage. And here's the kicker. Courage comes first. Confidence follows. You don't wait for the fear to go away. You learn to take it with you.
Right. And what do you need for that leap of faith into the stretch zone? A few key ingredients. First, believing you can improve with effort, that growth mindset idea. Second, being willing to tolerate that discomfort of vulnerability for a while. It won't feel good initially. Third, a real commitment to yourself, that you'll have your own back, support yourself whether you nail it or fall flat. That's self-compassion in action, being your own coach, not your critic. And finally, knowing how to handle the shame that might come with failure so you don't just quit. It's about building this rhythm. Step into fear, sit with it, step back, recover, repeat.
Yeah, this next point can be a game changer for a lot of people listening. The whole self-esteem industry, it pounds into us. Believe in yourself. You need high self-esteem to succeed, be happy, have good relationships. But the sources really push back on this. They point out that self-esteem is usually tied to external stuff. Looking good, winning, getting acknowledged, having wealth.
And when you define success externally, how do you measure it? You compare constantly, especially online now. You're guaranteed to find someone seemingly doing better. And boom, your self-esteem takes a hit. If you're not the winner, the logic goes, you must be a loser. And research actually shows high self-esteem doesn't correlate well with better performance or relationships. It does correlate with things like arrogance, prejudice. And those programs designed just to boost self-esteem. They didn't show significant benefits.
That's why the sources call self-esteem based on external success psychological rent you can never stop paying. The moment you sense you might be less than, you feel inadequate. It fuels this scarcity mindset, this constant hamster wheel of striving but never feeling enough.
And those positive affirmations. I am strong. I am worthy. Research actually found they can make people with low self-esteem feel worse. Because if you say it but don't believe it, your inner critic pipes up with all the counter-evidence. It creates internal conflict. What worked better in the study was just acknowledging negative thoughts as normal human experiences and responding with compassion, not fighting yourself. Then you use action to build real evidence for positive self-belief. Be your own coach. Honest, holding yourself accountable, but always encouraging. Helping you get back up, not beating yourself up.
So practically speaking, how do you change your relationship with fear to build that confidence? The toolkit suggests taking small steps, a graded approach. Don't jump into the deep end. Like if social situations make you anxious, don't force yourself into a massive party right away. Start smaller. A coffee with one trusted friend. A small gathering. Repeat that until it feels more comfortable. Then try the next slightly bigger challenge.
Yeah, it's about dipping a toe in, feeling that stress response kick in, but not letting it flood you, tolerating it. Another really useful tool from compassion-focused therapy is creating an image of a perfect nurturer or coach. Could be someone real, could be imagined. You picture telling them your struggles, your fears, and then you vividly imagine how they'd respond with kindness, encouragement, wisdom. Writing that down helps you internalize that voice. It sets the tone for how you can start talking to yourself when you're feeling vulnerable.
This feels like it gets to the heart of it. So much self-doubt is tied up in how we handle failure, isn't it? Failure always stings. It feels personal, like proof we weren't smart enough, good enough, whatever enough. And social media, with its instant judgment, just amplifies that fear of messing up publicly. If we think mistakes deserve humiliation, how can we ever take the risks needed to grow or create anything new?
Exactly. And how other people react to your failure, that says more about their relationship with failure than it does about your worth. The societal pressure for perfection, it's actually stifling innovation, genuine connection. The real failure isn't the mistake itself. It's the unwillingness to own it, learn from it, maybe even share the vulnerability. That vulnerability is where resilience is built. But the sting of failure makes us want to just shut down those feelings, block them out, which leads to numbing hours of TV, booze, endless scrolling. It gives temporary relief, sure, you dodge that feeling. But repeating that pattern keeps us stuck in a comfort zone that feels safe, but ultimately draining, lacking energy.
So if avoidance keeps us stuck, and the alternative is accepting failure as part of growth, how do you actually do that? It's easy to say, harder to feel. You can't control how others react. Some people will criticize, some will help you up. So the only reliable option is committing to doing that for yourself, taking responsibility for tending to your own wounds, dusting yourself off. Your resilience can't depend on others.
The sources give a really practical 6-step guide for bouncing back. 1. Recognize the sensations. Notice the physical feelings, the urges. If you're diving into numbing behaviors, that's a clue. Failure often drives us to block, so the behavior might be the first sign. 2. Get unstuck. Create distance. See the emotion as something passing through, not who you are. Label it. There's that critical voice again. Or give it a name. Helga's having her say. It lessens its power. 3. Notice urges to block. The opposite of blocking is curiosity. Move towards the feeling, observe it, even while doing step 4. Fighting it keeps it stuck. 4. Soothe your way through. Be your own best friend. Honest, yes, but unconditionally loving and supportive. Wow, that hurt. Okay, I'm here. Like a friend who sits with you, doesn't try to fix it. 5, get learning. Once the initial pain eases, analyze it like a coach. What went wrong? Okay, but also, what went right? What can I take from this? Turn it into useful information. 6, return to what matters. Even if it still hurts, align your next steps with your values. Setbacks are painful, but getting back out there might still be the right path for you. Ask, looking back, what choice would I be proud of? What action serves my values? How do I learn and move forward? Don't rush, but don't stay down.
There's this common idea, isn't there, that self-acceptance equals laziness. Like, if I'm okay as I am, why bother improving? But the research actually shows the opposite. People who practice self-acceptance and self-compassion are less afraid of failure. They're more likely to persevere, to try again after messing up. They actually have more confidence.
It's a crucial difference. Self-acceptance isn't just shrugging your shoulders, it's unconditional self-love. And sometimes love means taking the harder path because it's what's best for you long-term. It means refusing to beat yourself up when you're down and instead using your energy to get back up. The motivation comes from a place of care and contentment, not fear and not enoughness. Without that base of self-acceptance, we're constantly seeking external validation, staying in bad situations, holding on to resentment.
So how do you cultivate it? It sounds like it starts with self-awareness, really looking inward. Journaling, therapy, honest conversations with friends, ways to understand our patterns. Why do we do what we do? And acceptance means looking at all of ourselves, the parts we're proud of, the parts we'd rather ignore, the difficult stuff. Approaching those tougher bits with compassion, like an observer trying to understand, not a judge.
Yes, and visualizing what it looks like in action. The sources suggest asking, if I lived with unconditional self-acceptance starting now, what would change? What would I say yes to, no to? What would I work harder on, let go of? How would I talk to myself, to others? Writing that down makes it concrete. And remembering, action first, feeling follows. It's a practice, never done.
And accepting all of you. That means recognizing that emotions and roles change. They aren't permanent labels. There's an exercise from compassion-focused therapy. Think of a recent emotional event. Identify the different feelings. Where did you feel them physically? What thoughts came up? What urges? And then, crucially, what did that part of you need in that moment? Then you approach it with your compassionate self. It helps diffuse the emotion, understand it without getting swamped, even see difficult emotions as normal.
This is really powerful for dealing with self-criticism, too. Try picturing your inner critic as a person outside of you. What do they look like? Sound like? What's their expression? How does it feel being near them? What's their goal? Would you choose to spend time with this person? Would they help you live a good life? What's the real impact of having that voice with you 24/7? It helps externalize it, see its effect. Then you actively cultivate a new voice, a compassionate one. Not fake positivity, but honest, kind encouragement. Support. Try writing a compassionate letter to yourself like you would to a friend who's suffering. I've got your back. We'll get through this. Build that muscle.
Okay, let's talk about something we all wish for sometimes. Just making anxiety disappear. It's so uncomfortable, right?
Sure.
Exhausting. Your body feels like it's working overtime. The author's story about climbing the Leaning Tower of Pisa, that captures it perfectly. Pure phobia kicking in. Heart-pounding, shallow breathing, sweaty palms, that overwhelming urge to just get down. Logic goes out the window, sitting on the floor, trying to look casual.
Yeah, her brain's alarm system was screaming, danger, get safe. It's like a smoke alarm designed to react fast, not analyze deeply. It pulls together body signals, what's around you, past memories, and rings the bell. And just like a smoke alarm goes off for burnt toast, it can be a false alarm. The urge to get safe, that's the system working. But, and this is key, the actions she took that felt safer, like not looking out, they didn't actually make her physically safer.
And that's the trap, isn't it? The things that bring instant relief, avoiding the view, leaving early, they keep us stuck long-term. Every time we avoid, the brain learns, see, that was dangerous, good thing we got out, or I couldn't handle it. Life just gets smaller. If she knew then what she knows now, she says she would have. Allowed the feelings.
Allowed the feelings, yeah. Controlled her breathing. Reminded herself she was actually safe. Focused on why she was there. Stayed until the fear naturally subsided a bit. Repeated that exposure to let our body get used to it. Habituate. Fear's a normal survival response. Intense. But our attempts to control it, to eliminate it, that becomes the problem. It starts running the show.
When we feel anxious, the most natural thing is to avoid. Seems logical. Stay away, feel safer, for now. But avoidance doesn't just maintain anxiety, it fuels it, makes it worse over time. Your brain learns through experience, like a scientist gathering data. If you avoid the thing you fear, you never collect the data proving you can survive it, get through it. Just telling your brain it's safe isn't enough. It needs the lived experience.
Which means you need to repeat the exposure over and over to eventually make it part of your comfort zone. The things you do often become comfortable. So if you want to feel less anxious about public speaking or driving or whatever it is, you have to do it as often as you reasonably can. Using skills to manage the anxiety until it gradually lessens. Imagine, just for a second, if for the next 5 years you made decisions based on the life you want, not the fear you feel.
Thinking about that, we use lots of little safety behaviors that make us feel better in the moment but keep the anxiety cycle going. The sources list quite a few.
Yeah, things like escape, bolting from a situation as soon as anxiety hits.
Or anxious avoidance, saying no to things, getting deliveries instead of going out, instant relief, growing fear.
Compensatory strategies, like excessive hand washing if you fear contamination, overdoing it to feel safe.
Anticipation or sensitization, constantly rehearsing worst-case scenarios, thinking it prepares you, but it just keeps you hyper-vigilant.
Reassurance seeking, constantly asking others, will it be okay? Are you sure? Gives temporary comfort but creates dependence.
And reliance on safety objects, needing pills just in case, or always having your phone out to avoid interaction.
So what can you do right now when anxiety hits hard? Your breathing speeds up automatically. Body getting ready, slowing it down sends a signal back. Okay, maybe we can calm down. Especially making the out-breath longer or more forceful than the in-breath, like breathing in for 7, out for 11, that directly helps slow your heart rate.
When that pounding heart eases off, the whole anxiety response starts to dial down.
A really practical one is square breathing. Easy to learn, use anywhere. Focus on something: square window, screen, book. Inhale slowly for 4 counts, tracing up one side. Hold for 4, tracing across the top. Exhale for 4, tracing down the other side. Hold for 4, tracing the bottom. Practicing it daily, even when calm, makes it automatic when you need it.
And another powerful, almost instant tool, movement or exercise.
Right.
Anxiety floods your muscles with fuel, oxygen, adrenaline ready for action. If you just sit there, it's like a revving engine with nowhere to go. Trembling, shaking, pacing. Exercise burns that fuel, uses up the stress hormones, rebalances your system. Plus, it's a fantastic preventative measure too. Regular movement boosts mental health overall. Okay, let's get into managing anxious thoughts. They feel so real, don't they? Like a horror movie playing just for you. The author's childhood fear of a house fire, constantly visualizing it, believing it was happening, even though it wasn't.
Exactly. But thoughts, they aren't facts. They're guesses, stories, memories, theories. Your brain offers them up as possible explanations for what you're feeling. We know they aren't pure fact because they're so easily swayed by how you feel physically, what you see, hear, remember. So the power they have, it depends entirely on how much you buy into them, how much you believe they're true. The first step to reducing their power is getting some distance.
How do you get distance from something inside your own head? Mindfulness helps. Practicing just noticing thoughts come and go without grabbing onto them. And recognizing common thought biases, those mental shortcuts that anxiety loves. If you can spot a thought and say, that's catastrophizing or that's personalization, you hold it at arm's length. See it as just one possible, maybe biased perspective.
Using distance language helps too. Instead of, I'm going to fail, try, I'm having the thought that I'm going to fail. Or, I notice that thought makes me feel anxious. It sounds a bit clinical maybe, but it separates you from the thought. The thought becomes an event you're observing.
And something I find really helpful, write them down. Getting them out of your head and onto paper gives you that bird's eye view. It helps process things.
Let's quickly list those common thought biases the sources mention. Catastrophizing, jumping straight to the absolute worst case scenario, treating it like it's definitely going to happen. Like the author thinking she'd die on the tower. Personalizing, making ambiguous things about you. They didn't reply to my text, they must be angry with me. Mental filter, only noticing the negative stuff, filtering out the positive. One bad comment drowns out 50 good ones. Focusing on the tower leaning, ignoring centuries of it standing. Overgeneralizing, taking one bad experience and making it a rule for everything. I failed that test, I'll never pass anything. Turns one setback into a life sentence. Labeling, using one event or feeling to define your whole identity. I feel anxious sometimes, therefore I am an anxious person. Makes it feel permanent.
You can also try to fact-check the anxious thought. Like a detective, write down the scary thought, then list evidence for it being true and evidence against it. Be strict, only courtroom admissible evidence. Sometimes that shows the thought is mostly fake news. You can then look for more realistic alternatives. But if fact-checking just turns into a big internal debate, maybe switch back to those distancing techniques instead.
It's amazing how our brains filter information, isn't it? Constantly sorting through endless data. Our attention acts like a spotlight. That story about the Sydney Harbor Bridge proposal, It's extreme, but it shows the power of focus. Going up, her spotlight was locked onto thoughts of dying. Coming down, engaged, the spotlight shifted entirely to thoughts of living. She let go of the rail without even thinking.
Right. We can't rely on surprise proposals, obviously. But we can practice directing that spotlight. If you let your focus linger on anxious, worst-case scenario thoughts, they fuel the threat response. Keep it going. But if you consciously shift your spotlight maybe onto your breathing, onto your surroundings, onto a calming thought, the anxious thoughts might still be there on the edge of the stage. But they lose their power. You're not blocking them, just choosing not to make them the star of the show.
Where you direct your attention literally helps shape your reality, your experience. Training that spotlight, learning to control where it points, that's a real investment in your future emotional state.
Anxious thoughts are always threat-focused. They keep the alarm bells ringing. So to calm that system down, we need to consciously cultivate thoughts that promote calm safety. The author's story about her son after surgery, waking up unable to see. Her calm, compassionate presence was key. She couldn't fix his sight or pain, but her steady, reassuring voice, "I'm here, you're safe," helped him cope, accept, move through it.
Kindness and compassion, whether from someone else or, crucially, from your own internal dialogue, they actively turn down the threat response, make you feel safer. It's a lifelong practice, needs constant attention. And compassion isn't just being nice or pretending everything's fine. It's that honest, kind, encouraging coach, calm but firm. Okay, this is tough. You can handle this. We'll get through it. Asking yourself, how would I coach a dear friend through this exact situation? That's often a good starting point for your own self-talk.
Another really useful tool here is reframing, using language or imagery to shift your perception of something without denying the reality. Like reframing her stressful Viva exam from a risk of failure to an opportunity to show what I've learned. That totally changed her experience. Moved her from feeling like prey, flight, to feeling more empowered, like rising to a challenge, fight, moving towards it intentionally.
Putting it all together. When those anxious thoughts are hogging the spotlight, consciously bring thoughts about your values and identity onto the stage too. Sometimes fear is a useful guide if there's real danger, but often life is richer when decisions come from our values, from what matters most. Ask, why is this important to me? Looking back, what action would make me feel proud? What kind of person do I want to be right now? What do I want to stand for? If you decide you want to be courageous or kind or persistent, that gives you a blueprint for behavior, even when anxiety is screaming something different. Decide who you are and let that guide you.
Okay, let's shift gears slightly to stress. We use stress and anxiety almost interchangeably sometimes, don't we? You might be stressed about work, anxious about spiders, stressed by traffic, stressed about losing your job. But the sources draw a helpful distinction here.
Right. For this deep dive, let's think of stress primarily as your brain and body gearing up to do something. It's about matching your internal energy levels to the demands you're facing outside. When that match feels right, stress can actually feel positive, like being pumped up for a competition, ready, engaged. Anxiety, on the other hand, tends to be more fear-based, often involves those excessive worry thoughts, predicting something threatening, maybe even dangerous.
So the underlying body response, the stress response is similar, but the meaning we attach is different. Like breaking glass downstairs triggers fear, anxiety, need to escape or fight.
Yeah.
But juggling work and kids might be stressful, demanding, but maybe without that immediate danger feeling.
Exactly. And the stress response itself isn't just fight or flight. It can be a challenge response, feeling agitated, motivated, ready to rise to the occasion.
What about the biology? Cortisol gets such a bad name, the stress hormone.
Well, cortisol actually plays a vital role. It helps release energy, quickly glucose into your blood for fuel. Your senses sharpen, you process information faster. It's your body kicking into high gear to meet the challenge, operating at its best in a way. The problems start when those resources aren't replenished. Rest, sleep, nutrition. If you don't top up, you get a shortfall. Do that repeatedly, deplete the system, and that's when you become vulnerable to illness.
And anticipatory stress.
Yeah.
Worrying about the interview before it happens.
That happens when we predict a demand. And if we also predict we won't be able to cope, that's when we get anxious about the stress itself, which just prolongs the whole thing.
This raises a really important point. We're always told to reduce stress, which is good advice generally, but it's often vague. And let's be honest, many major stressors aren't things you can just eliminate. Illness, money worries, relationship breakdowns, a scary diagnosis, these hit hard. We need tools for those moments, right?
Yeah.
Tools to manage the stress response in real time.
We have this weird relationship with stress, don't we? We avoid it, but we also seek it out. Roller coasters, horror films, situations where we feel out of control but trust we're ultimately safe. Too little stress, life gets boring. Just enough. Engaging, challenging, too much. The benefits vanish, damage starts. It's a balancing act. Stress isn't a system failure, it's a signal. Short-term, adrenaline actually boosts immunity, sharpens focus, helps us perform. The idea that stress is just some outdated relic, that's incomplete. It's a tool, preparing for a presentation. You need alertness, focus, not total calm.
And here's maybe the most crucial insight. You can't really separate stress from a meaningful life. Think about it. Anything you truly care about, strive for, work towards, it's going to involve your stress response. It has to. Stress gets you moving towards goals. So feeling stressed isn't just a warning sign. It can also mean you're engaged, you're acting on your values, you're living with purpose. If it matters, it probably involves some stress. So if we learn to use it better, manage its intensity, stress could actually be one of our most valuable tools.
The stress response is designed for short bursts. Chronic stress, keeping it activated long term. That's like, as the source says, driving in second gear on the motorway. It causes wear and tear. Sustained stress impairs impulse control, memory, decision-making. And long-term, it messes with immune function. Adrenaline gives that short boost, but over time, abnormal cortisol patterns are linked to serious health issues, shorter lifespan. That's why people often get sick after a really intense period. The stress eases, the adrenaline drops, and the suppressed immune system struggles.
Which leads to burnout. That's a recognized health issue now, right?
Yeah.
Resulting from excessive, prolonged stress. Often linked to work, but it happens in caring roles, parenting, volunteering too. People describe feeling utterly drained, emotionally exhausted, running on empty, feeling detached, cynical, losing that sense of accomplishment or competence they once had.
Burnout often comes down to a chronic mismatch between the person and their environment, specifically in areas like 1. Control, feeling like you lack the resources or autonomy to meet the demands placed on you. 2. Reward, not getting enough recognition, financial or social, for the effort you're putting in. 3. Community, lack of positive connection, support, belonging, feeling isolated. 4. Fairness, perceiving inequality in workload, resources, or how people are treated. 5. Values, when what you're required to do clashes fundamentally with what you believe is important.
And you can't always just eliminate those mismatches. If you're juggling multiple jobs, carrying responsibilities, an idyllic morning routine isn't the answer. It's about finding balance where you can. Signs of chronic stress are things like ongoing sleep problems, appetite changes, being irritable, trouble concentrating, headaches, muscle pain, and often an increased reliance on numbing or addictive behaviors. It really affects your whole system.
So connecting the dots. To manage stress healthily, you have to balance the demands coming in with ways to replenish and release the pressure out. The more stress in the bucket, the more open the release valves need to be.
We talked about breathing for anxiety, and it works just as well for stress. That longer, maybe more forceful exhale slows the heart, calms the system. It's not about achieving total zen in a crisis, but about lowering the overwhelm enough so your thinking brain can come back online. Use the benefits of stress, the alertness, without being paralyzed by it.
Another incredibly powerful strategy, turning to others. Connection. Our survival instincts aren't just fight or flight. There's also tend and befriend. Connecting with others, protecting them, caring for others during stressful times actually changes our brain chemistry, boosts feelings of hope, courage. It buffers us against the negative effects of chronic stress, builds resilience. Social isolation itself is a massive stressor. Strong relationships are protective.
Let's talk about goals for a minute. The self-help world often pushes very self-focused goals, doesn't it? Be the best, stand out, get rich, be exceptional. But the science, it suggests those kinds of goals can actually make us more vulnerable to depression, anxiety, loneliness.
Whereas goals that are framed around something bigger than just your self-contribution, helping others, a cause you believe in, those tend to correlate with more hope, gratitude, well-being, life satisfaction. When you consciously connect your stressful efforts to your values, to making a difference, the stress itself becomes more manageable. It changes the meaning of the struggle. Your self-worth isn't tied to just winning or proving yourself. It's inherent in the effort, in living your values.
How do you make that shift from self-focus to something bigger? When stress hits, maybe pause and ask, how does this fit with my values? What contribution am I trying to make here? What difference does this make to others? What do I want to stand for while I go through this? What does this effort mean to me?
The toolkit for stress also mentions meditation. We know it's powerful for the brain, helps emotion regulation. When time is tight, Yoga Nidra, a guided deep rest meditation, has shown benefits for stress and sleep even in short bursts, like 11 minutes.
That's probably a better use of 10 minutes than scrolling, right?
And mindfulness meditation generally, training your attention to stay in the present, notice sensations without judgment, doesn't have to be formal sitting meditation. You can bring mindfulness into everyday things. Mindful walking. Notice your feet, your arms moving, sounds, sights, smells. Mindful showering. Feel the water, temperature, smell the soap, hear the sounds. Mindful teeth brushing. Taste the paste, feel the brush, hear it. Just noticing when your mind wanders, gently bringing it back.
And finally, actively seek out experiences of awe, that feeling you get when faced with something vast, something beyond your usual understanding. Nature often does it. Incredible beauty, witnessing amazing human skill. Awe kind of forces a mental reset. It shifts your focus from your own small worries to the bigger picture. Right, it brings perspective. Gratitude, wonder. Makes you feel small in a good way maybe. Can really dial down stress. The sources suggest documenting those moments, maybe journaling about them so you can revisit that feeling later.
What about coping in those really high-pressure moments? Job interviews, exams. You can't just relax. The goal is to harness the pressure, use its benefits without getting overwhelmed. Your mindset is absolutely key. Research shows that simply believing your stress response is helpful, that it's an asset preparing you to perform. That actually improves performance. It frees up mental energy you'd otherwise spend trying to suppress the feeling. You channel the energy instead.
Using language deliberately helps too. Elite coaches do this. Instead of vague positive self-talk, use concrete, specific instructions, how-to statements. Describe the successful process. Conjure the right feeling for your intention. Clear guidance.
Reframing again, changing the label. Is this a threat or a challenge? Are these nerves anxiety or determination? Shifting perception helps shift the response. Also, in high stress, we get tunnel vision. Physically and mentally narrow focus. Consciously shifting to a wider panoramic view, keeping your head still, just broadening your gaze, can actually calm the nervous system, raise your stress threshold, lets you handle more pressure.
And lastly, failure. When stakes feel high, fear of failure skyrockets stress. We worry about the consequences. To counter this, immerse yourself in the process. A narrow focus on the steps you need to take right now. Leave no mental room for outcome worries. Practice builds trust in that process.
When we tie mistakes to our self-worth, even small slip-ups trigger shame. Makes us want to quit, hide. But self-compassion allows you to look at the behavior, take accountability, learn, and move on without getting stuck in shame. See the mistake as an event, not a verdict on your character. Remember those core negative beliefs, I'm useless, I'm a failure. They're common human thoughts. You're not alone. Be your own kind, honest coach, especially then. That's how you keep going, keep improving.
So if we have better tools for navigating self-doubt, fear, stress, it naturally leads to the bigger question. What makes life feel meaningful, worthwhile? So many people say, I just want to be happy. But our modern idea of happiness, it's often this unrealistic fairy tale of constant pleasure, right? And social media pushes relentless positivity, makes you feel like you're failing if you're not happy 24/7.
But humans aren't designed for constant happiness. Our emotions are like the weather, they change. Constantly, that's normal. You can live a deeply fulfilling, happy life while still experiencing the full spectrum of human emotion, pain, fear, sadness included. In fact, the things that often bring the most joy and meaning, family, deep relationships, also inevitably bring worry, hate, fear sometimes. Emotions come as a package deal. You can't cherry pick. Maybe true happiness isn't the absence of struggle, but the capacity to navigate the struggles with purpose.
That really reframes it. People often feel adrift, lacking energy, unsure what goals are even worth pursuing. The sources suggest this often stems from a disconnect from our core values. Getting clear on your values. It acts like a compass, gives you direction, helps you set goals that feel genuinely fulfilling, and it helps you push through the hard times because you know why you're doing it, you know you're on your path.
And values are different from goals. A goal is finite, pass the exam, buy the house. Then it's done. You need a new one. Values are about how you want to live, ongoing, the kind of person you want to be, the principles you stand for. If life's a journey, values are the direction you choose to walk, the path itself. Goals are like milestones along that path. Living by your values is about the conscious effort to stay true to that direction day by day.
So values are in the doing, the attitude you bring, why you make choices, not something you achieve and tick off a list. And they can change, right? As you grow, experience life. So checking in regularly, are these still my core values? Am I living in line with them? Seems vital.
Absolutely. If you lack that clarity, you might end up chasing goals set by others, or goals you think will finally make you feel enough. That just pushes happiness further away, makes it conditional. I'll be happy when. Instead, recognizing the meaning, the good stuff, is often in the process, the journey itself. Living purposefully now.
How do you figure out your values if you're feeling unsure? The sources have some practical exercises. One is a values check-in grid. You list different life areas, relationships, work, health, creativity, etc. Then you rate, say, 0 to 10, how important each value is to you right now, and then how much you feel you're living that value, 0 to 10. Big gaps between important and living it show where you might feel off track, where change is needed.
There's also the values star, a visual way to see it. Label points of a star with life domains. Mark your living its score on each line from the center, 0 to the point 10. Connect the dots. An uneven star shows which areas need more attention, where the lines are shorter. And it's crucial to distinguish your values from ones you've maybe absorbed from family, society. That can explain why certain areas feel draining or unfulfilling.
Regular journaling prompts help too. What would make me feel proud of how I approach today? What do I want to stand for in my relationships? My health? What kind of impact matters to me?
Okay, so you clarify your values, you decide to make a change. Often we jump to huge goals. I'm going to run a marathon. But just having the big goal isn't usually enough for lasting change. It's the small stuff, the everyday details, the repeated behaviors that actually move you forward and keep you there.
Right, the life-changing part of the marathon isn't the finish line. It's the daily habit of running, the gradual increases, the changes in eating. The end goal can even be limiting. People run the marathon, then stop running. Values provide ongoing direction. If your value is health or vitality, that keeps guiding you long after any single race is over.
It's like a two-part process. First, visualize the person you want to be, guided by your values. Get clear on that identity. Second, turn that vision into small, concrete, sustainable actions you can take consistently. That why, that identity, anchors you when things get tough, when resistance pops up. Over time, the new behaviors start to feel like you. I exercise because I'm someone who values my health, not just because I have a goal.
Focusing only on the outcome makes it easy to quit when results are slow or obstacles appear. Motivation based purely on the goal, it's like a match flame, burns out quickly. Small, sustainable actions, fueled by that sense of identity, by your values. That's the fuel for real, lasting change.
And this brings us somewhere really fundamental. We can't talk about a meaningful life without talking about relationships. They're central. They're what make us human. The longest study on happiness found relationships trump money, fame, class, even genes for a long, happy life. They are that important. They protect our physical health, our mental health. It's profound. And one of the top regrets people have at the end of life. I wish I'd stayed in touch with my friends.
Yet, for something so vital, there's no instruction manual. We learned how to do relationships mostly from our childhood experiences. We soak up those patterns when we're most vulnerable. And sometimes those early blueprints aren't very helpful for our adult connections. Therapies like cognitive analytic therapy, or CAT, actually help people map out those repeating, often unhelpful relationship cycles.
Let's bust a few common relationship myths that pop culture feeds us. Myths that can make us feel like we're failing. Myth 1. Love shouldn't be hard. If it's right, it should be easy. No. All relationships, romantic, family, friends, take work. Conscious choices based on values, consistent effort. Myth 2. You should be as one. Disagreement is bad. No, you're two separate people. Healthy relationships involve navigating and accepting differences. Myth 3. You should be together constantly. Need space. That's okay. Nurturing your individual self strengthens, not threatens, a secure bond. Myth 4. Happily ever after means no bumps. Wrong. Real relationships have ups and downs, disconnection, arguments. It's normal. The strength is in reconnecting. Myth 5. Success means staying together no matter what. Quality over quantity. It's okay, even necessary sometimes, to end relationships that are consistently harmful.
So how do you get better at relationships? It sounds like self-care is part of it. Looking after yourself helps you show up better for others. All the tools we've discussed, managing self-doubt, fear, stress, they equip you to be the partner, friend, parent you want to be.
Yeah, and getting better isn't about trying to change the other person. It's about understanding your own needs, your patterns, your cycles, and then practicing new ways of communicating, connecting, setting boundaries. Focus on who you want to be in the relationship, what you bring, what you stand for.
John Gottman's research is fascinating here. He found that something like 70% of relationship satisfaction comes down to the quality of the friendship within the partnership. So actively working on being better friends seems key. Enjoying time together, showing respect, really knowing each other, expressing appreciation daily.
And connection is everything. When emotions run high, the instinct is often to withdraw, protect yourself. But that leads to disconnection, turning towards each other, especially in tough moments. That's what builds deep trust. Those numbing behaviors we talked about, scrolling, workaholism, they're often ways we try to escape the vulnerability of connection when things feel difficult.
The experts suggest focusing on things like self-awareness. Understand your own patterns with curiosity, not judgment. Emotional responsiveness. See big emotions as bids for connection. Are you there for me? Learn to tune in, respond with kindness, stay engaged. Respectful complaining. Focus on specific behaviors, not character attacks. When X happens, I feel Y, and I need Z. Maintain respect even when disagreeing. Repairs. After conflict, own your part. Find compromise. Prioritize reconnecting. Use acceptance, compassion, love, gratitude. It's okay to take a break to calm down first. Turning towards gratitude. Consciously notice and appreciate the good things about the other person. Shifts your whole state. Shared meaning and values. Find the overlap in what matters to both of you. Respect the differences. That shared compass helps navigate challenges.
Our attachment style, formed way back in early childhood, creates a kind of template for our adult relationships. It's like the default operating system. It shapes how we see closeness, independence, safety, reliability, even our own worthiness of love. And it often leads to repeating patterns until we make them conscious.
Like, someone with an anxious attachment style might need to consciously work on feeling safe and secure within themselves, not just relying on constant reassurance, while their partner might need to offer that consistent connection proactively.
And someone with an avoidance style might need to consciously practice tolerating the vulnerability of opening up, while their partner needs to understand why intimacy might feel threatening and gently nurture closeness without overwhelming them. It's about awareness and intentional choices.
Ultimately, improving relationships seems to boil down to those small, everyday choices, making them conscious, intentional, aligning them with your values reliably. It's not about grand gestures, but consistent effort.
This leads to a final, important question many might have. When should you seek professional help? The simplest answer is, anytime you are concerned about your mental health, period.
There are real barriers, for sure: cost, stigma, access. But if you can get support, taking that step can be genuinely life-changing. People often wait until they're at absolute breaking point, thinking, oh, others have it worse, or I should be able to handle this.
But waiting just makes the hill steeper. It's never a good strategy for your well-being. Yes, someone might always be worse off, but your struggles still matter. Your health matters.
Therapy takes commitment, absolutely. It's not a quick fix, but it can pull you back from a really dark place, help you turn things around.
And when professional help isn't accessible, human connection and education become even more vital. The internet, for all its flaws, has helped normalize talking about mental health, shown us that struggles are common, fluctuations are normal. We're not just at the mercy of our emotions. We can learn. We can make changes. We can take responsibility for our well-being. Learn everything you can from reliable sources. Talk to people you trust. Connection and knowledge are powerful tools for change. Hashtag tag outro.
Wow. Okay. That was a truly deep dive into the stuff that makes us human. We've covered so much ground, understanding self-doubt, what confidence really is, practical ways to handle fear and anxiety, how to use stress constructively, not just fight it, and the huge role of values and relationships in building a life that feels meaningful.
Yeah, and if there's one thread running through it all, it's this idea of active engagement and self-compassion. These aren't things that just happen to us. They're experiences we can learn from, navigate differently, use to align our lives with what we truly care about. It really comes down to being your own ally, your own coach, choosing your focus, seeing stumbles as stepping stones.
And recognizing it's a practice, right?
Yeah.
This journey of self-discovery, living intentionally,
Yeah.
It's never really done. It's ongoing.
Absolutely. So maybe we leave you with this thought. If you could look back on this next chapter of your life, say a year from now, what choices, what ways of showing up would make you feel genuinely proud? How can you lean into vulnerability, into discomfort today, knowing it's building the courage you need for the life you really want? Remember, that capacity for growth, for compassion, for meaning, it's always there within you.